Behind every locked door lies a story the world was never meant to hear. Welcome to Behind Bars TV, where we uncover the hidden realities of the world's toughest prisons, untold inmate experiences, and the systems built to contain them. From supermax facilities to forgotten penitentiaries, we reveal the truth behind concrete walls and razor wire. This is not fiction. This is the world behind bars. In here, every second costs money. The more we stay, the more they make. Welcome to business, Behind Bars. Aerial footage of sprawling prison complexes in Texas, Florida, and Arizona. Corporate logos fade over the rooftops. CoreCivic, GEO Group. Across the United States, over 100,000 inmates wake up every morning inside privately run prisons. Facilities operated not by the government, but by corporations. Their promise was simple: to save taxpayers' money, reduce overcrowding, and bring efficiency to corrections. But what began as an experiment in reform has become a multi-billion-dollar empire, one built on contracts, quotas, and controversy. Behind every locked cell door is a balance sheet. Behind every inmate, a line of profit. And as one whistleblower said, when punishment becomes a business, freedom becomes an expense. Tonight, we go inside the controversy dividing America's justice system. How corporations came to own prisons, how they make money from mass incarceration, and what that means for the people trapped inside. This is the story of a system where crime pays, just not for the people doing time. Stay until the end, because once you learn how this system really works, you'll never look at justice the same way again. The birth of the private prison boom. The story of private prisons begins not with greed, but with panic. By the early 1980s, America's prison population had exploded. The war on drugs had flooded the justice system. Tough-on-crime policies filled cells faster than states could build them. In less than 10 years, the U.S. prison population doubled, from 300,000 to over 600,000 inmates. By the mid-1990s, it would surpass 1 million. Faced with overcrowding and public outrage, state governments turned to an unlikely savior: the private sector. The pitch was simple and seductive. Private companies claimed they would run prisons cheaper, safer, and more efficiently than the government. They promised to handle everything: housing, food, security, even healthcare. In 1984, in Hamilton County, Tennessee, the first modern private prison contract was signed. The company? Corrections Corporation of America, now known as CoreCivic. The idea caught fire. Within a decade, nearly every major state had signed deals with private operators, including GEO Group, Management and Training Corporation, and dozens of smaller contractors. The business model of incarceration: private prisons are built on a simple equation: more inmates equals more profit. Every bed filled generates revenue. Every empty cell is a loss. Contracts are written like business deals, not justice agreements. Many include occupancy guarantees, clauses requiring the government to keep prisons at least 80% full, or pay penalties. That means empty cells don't save taxpayers money. They cost them. Critics call it the prison quota system. Supporters call it cost efficiency. But to inmates, it feels like a trap with no escape. And returns, they got. By the early 2000s, CoreCivic and GEO Group were trading on the New York Stock Exchange, their combined revenue surpassing $3 billion annually. The lobbying machine. But to keep profits high, private prison companies needed more than contracts. They needed a steady supply of inmates. That's where politics came in. Since the 1990s, CoreCivic and GEO Group have spent millions lobbying for laws that increase incarceration. Stricter sentencing, immigration detention, and mandatory minimums. In 2010 alone, Private prison companies donated over $3.5 million to political candidates and committees. For some, justice became a campaign strategy, and incarceration, a business plan. The human cost. Inside, the system runs on labor, cheap, unprotected, and indispensable. Inmates sew uniforms, cook meals, clean floors, and maintain buildings for pennies an hour. Their work keeps facilities running and profits flowing. Advocates call it exploitation. Companies call it rehabilitation. It's a world where punishment and profit merge. And the line between justice and business disappears, the numbers behind the empire. By 2019, private prisons held roughly 8% of all U.S. inmates and nearly 75% of all immigration detainees. The industry's top two corporations reported more than $4 billion in combined revenue that year. But behind those numbers are real people. Guards underpaid and undertrained, inmates denied medical care, and families paying the price for corporate efficiency. Efficiency, it turns out, has a cost. And in private prisons, that cost is human. A long, slow drone shot pulls back from a fenced compound in the desert. The lights inside flicker like stars. A city built on captivity. Private prisons began as a solution. But somewhere between profit and punishment, America found itself running a business it can't afford to quit. The money machine. How private prisons profit from punishment. Behind every barbed wire fence, there's a business model. And like any business, the goal isn't justice. It's growth. The private prison industry doesn't survive on crime. It survives on contracts. Government contracts worth billions, carefully structured to guarantee profit and shield loss. The contract system. Every private prison deal begins with a contract between the government and the company. These agreements decide how many inmates must be housed, for how long and at what price. And buried deep in the fine print lies the most controversial clause of all, the occupancy guarantee. These guarantees require that prisons remain at least 80 to 95% full, or the state must pay for empty beds. Former warden. You could call it a crime quota. If the cells are empty, somebody's losing money, and it's never the company. That means even if crime rates drop, evils, and if arrests fall, the system still demands bodies to keep the numbers steady. A nation celebrates lower crime rates, but somewhere in a boardroom, someone calls it lost revenue. The daily profit loop. Every inmate represents a steady stream of income. The state pays a per diem rate, often $60 to $100 per day, for each person confined. Multiply that by tens of thousands of inmates, and you get a multi-billion-dollar incentive to keep the gates locked tight. Food, healthcare, and staff are all included, but run as cheaply as possible. Every cut is a savings. Every savings is a dividend. Former nurse. We were told to reuse gloves and ration insulin. When I protested, I was written up. Efficiency on paper. Neglect in practice. Labor behind bars. Inside the walls, the money keeps moving. Prisoners work in kitchens, factories, and call centers. For wages that range from 23 cents to $1.15 an hour. Private facilities can use this labor to reduce costs, or sell products to outside companies for profit. In some states, private prisons have supplied furniture to government offices, uniforms to police departments, even products to retail brands. When labor costs almost nothing, profit margins climb sky high. Former inmate says, "They told us we were learning skills, but we weren't learning freedom. We were feeding the system. It's not just punishment anymore. It's production." The healthcare equation, healthcare, one of the most expensive parts of incarceration, is where private operators save the most. Reports from federal audits show chronic understaffing, denied treatments, and delayed surgeries, all to protect profit margins. Whistleblower says, "They'd tell us, if it's not life-threatening, it can wait." But in here, everything becomes life-threatening eventually. In one case, an inmate in Arizona's privately run prison died of untreated asthma after begging for help for 3 days. The company was fined less than $10,000. To them, death was cheaper than care. Immigration detention. The hidden gold mine. When crime rates fell in the 2010s, the private prison industry faced a problem. Fewer inmates meant less income. Their solution? A new market. Immigration detention. Today, roughly 75% of all IC detainees are held in privately operated centers. These contracts are some of the most profitable, often running at $140 per detainee per day. When border policies tighten, corporate profits surge. When policies relax, their stocks fall. For some, human migration isn't a crisis, it's a business cycle. Wall Street's stake in the system. But the reach goes further. Wall Street owns a piece of the prison. Large investment firms, including BlackRock and Vanguard, hold significant stakes in both GEO Group and CoreCivic. That means pension funds, mutual funds, and even college endowments indirectly profit from incarceration. Every month, ordinary people invest in a system they don't even know they're part of. Economists said, "It's the invisible chain. You don't have to believe in private prisons. Your money already does." Corporate incentives and hidden bonuses. Executive pay is often tied directly to occupancy and profit margins. When inmate numbers rise, bonuses grow. When healthcare costs drop, shareholders cheer. Even safety metrics can be redefined to fit profit goals. Assaults and staff shortages are sometimes reclassified as incidents under review to preserve public image. Inside a private prison, data can be massaged, but pain can't. What happens in private prisons often stays off the record, hidden behind the walls of corporate confidentiality. The expansion game. The industry's greatest trick, turning incarceration into infrastructure. Every time a state builds a new prison, it invests in keeping it full. And every time a private company breaks ground, it builds another reason for the system to expand. Texas, Arizona, and Florida alone host more than half of all private facilities in the country. In some rural towns, prisons are the main employer, and their closure would collapse local economies. So the question becomes, can America ever afford to stop mass incarceration when so many depend on it to survive? Public versus private. The accountability gap. Unlike public prisons, private operators aren't subject to the same transparency laws. They can deny requests for information under trade secret protection. That means deaths, assaults, and investigations can be hidden from the public eye, shielded by corporate privilege. Journalists said, "We can't even get basic data." They'll say, "We're not a government agency, we're a business." But that business is paid with taxpayer money. Public accountability without public access. The endgame. Perpetual profit. Private prisons are built to last because they're not just concrete buildings. They're revenue engines, funded by fear and powered by policy. When punishment becomes profitable, rehabilitation becomes a risk. And as long as the system rewards confinement over compassion, those numbers will keep climbing, no matter how many lives are trapped inside. Inside the walls. Life in a private prison. Behind these walls, the economy of punishment becomes personal. This is where policies turn into pressure and profit becomes survival. The shift change. Every morning, guards at private prisons begin their shift the same way: short-staffed, underpaid, and overworked. A typical officer here earns about $32,000 a year, barely above the poverty line. Compare that to state-run facilities where pay averages nearly $45,000 to $50,000, a former officer said. With low pay comes high turnover. Some private prisons report staff turnover rates above 70%. That means fewer trained officers, fewer eyes on the cameras, and more opportunities for chaos to take control. The 1 to 100 problem. In some units, One officer oversees up to 100 inmates. That's not management. It's risk management. Fewer staff means less security. Less security means more violence. Reports from the Department of Justice show that assaults are nearly twice as common in private prisons as in public ones. Former inmates said, if a fight breaks out, it takes forever for them to show up. Sometimes, you're on your own. And when control slips, it's not the executives who bleed. The food system. Meals inside private prisons are another corner quietly cut. Food contractors often receive per-inmate allowances so small that quality becomes an afterthought. At one Mississippi facility, inmates filed over 200 food-related grievances in a single year, reporting mold, spoiled meat, and roaches in rice. Former inmate. You eat or you don't. That's the rule. We used to call it punishment stew. Cheaper food means higher margins. But hunger breeds anger, and anger fuels violence. Healthcare and neglect. In theory, private prisons provide medical care. In practice, it's the most dangerous waiting room in America. At the GEO-run Reeves County Detention Center in Texas, an inmate named Jesus Manuel Galindo, epileptic and begging for treatment, died in solitary confinement after guards ignored his seizures. The riot that followed left parts of the facility burned and dozens injured. Former nurse said, "We were told to patch them up, not treat them. Every medical denial saved the company money. Every death was written up as unavoidable." Inmate labor. The engine inside. Inside, the rhythm of prison labor runs like clockwork. Hundreds of inmates roam e-port for shifts, working kitchens, cleaning halls, welding, stitching, recycling. In return, they earn less than a cup of coffee a day. In some private prisons, inmate work replaces union jobs outside. A hidden workforce invisible to most Americans. Former inmates said, "They said it was rehabilitation. But when the machines broke, they wanted us fixed. Fast." Rehabilitation became production. And labor became leverage. The isolation wing. For inmates who resist or speak out, there's another level of control. Solitary confinement. Private prisons are notorious for overusing isolation, partly because it requires fewer staff to manage high-risk individuals. Some prisoners spend weeks, even months, in cells the size of parking spaces, with no human contact. Former inmates said, "The lights never went off. You start hearing things that aren't there." Solitary may silence the body, but it breaks the mind. The profit of punishment. Inside a private prison, everything has a price. From phone calls, to toothpaste, to time. Phone companies pay commissions to prisons for every minute of inmate talk time. That means $3 for a 15-minute call, a luxury for the poor. Visitation? Limited. Video calls? Charged by the minute. Every connection to the outside world becomes a transaction, and in a system built for profit, loneliness pays well. The guards speak. Guard number 1 said, "We were outnumbered 10-1. The radios barely worked. If something went wrong, you hoped someone was listening." Guard number 2 said, "They cut corners on everything. Training, staff, even backup batteries for the locks." Low morale breeds corruption. Reports have documented smuggled drugs, cover-ups, and even guards participating in gang violence. When safety becomes secondary, survival becomes strategy. The inmates' voices. Voice number 1 said, "They say it's private, but my pain is public. See." Voice number 2 said, "The guards call us customers. I guess that makes them salesmen." Voice number 3 said, "I used to think prison was about punishment. Now I think it's about business. For those inside, every sentence carries 2 meanings. One in law, and one in money." Inside the numbers. The hidden death toll. According to public records, Inmate deaths due to neglect, suicide, or violence are 40% higher in private facilities than state-run ones. In many cases, investigations stall. Footage goes missing. Files are sealed. Justice stops at the gate. Accountability never makes it inside. The broken promise. Private prisons promised innovation. They promised rehabilitation. They promised to help people come out better. But what they built instead was a cheaper, harder, quieter version of the same old pain. And when punishment turns into profit, every improvement feels like a loss. The political web, lobbyists, quotas, and corporate power. If private prisons are the body of this system, then politics is its heartbeat. Every policy, every law, every tough-on-crime speech pulses with the rhythm of money. The lobbying machine. Since the 1990s, the private prison industry has quietly built one of the most effective lobbying networks in Washington. Their goal? To keep incarceration profitable and politically acceptable. In the past 2 decades, CoreCivic and GEO Group alone have spent over $25 million on lobbying and campaign contributions. They fund politicians who promise law and order. They support think tanks that warn of soft justice. And they craft laws that make mass incarceration a permanent business model. Political analysts said, "It's not about crime. It's about contracts. The more beds you fill, the more bills they pass." The revolving door. Many lobbyists for these corporations aren't outsiders. They're insiders, former lawmakers, corrections officers, and even Justice Department officials. It's a revolving door. One day they regulate prisons, the next day they sell them. In 2013, a former ICE official joined GEO Group's board. By the following year, the company had secured millions in new immigration detention contracts. The faces change. The system doesn't. The birth of ALEC, laws for sale. Few organizations have shaped the prison industry more than ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. Founded in 1973, ALEC brings corporations and lawmakers together behind closed doors to draft model bills. These bills are then handed to politicians, who pass them as law. Among ALEC's creations were the 3 strikes laws, mandatory minimum sentencing, and truth in sentencing policies, all of which dramatically increased prison populations. At the table, representatives from CoreCivic and GEO Group. Journalists said, "It was genius, in a dark way. They didn't just build prisons. They helped write the laws that filled them." The quota system. Built by design. In 2012, Arizona signed a private prison contract guaranteeing 97% occupancy. If the state failed to keep the cells full, taxpayers still paid for them. Similar agreements exist in Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Georgia. Empty beds became a liability. Freedom became a financial problem. Former state auditor said, "It's legalized extortion. The state loses either way." These quotas didn't just protect profit. They pressured judges, prosecutors, and police to maintain a steady flow of convictions. The immigration connection. When the war on drugs slowed down, the industry found a new market: immigration detention. In 2014, a leaked memo from GEO Group called immigrant detention a core growth area. By 2019, private companies operated nearly 80% of all ICE detention beds. Every immigration crackdown meant a spike in profits. Every deportation moratorium meant a drop in share prices. Economists said, the border became their business model. Political protection. Whenever scandals erupted, abuse Rio, its deaths, corporate lobbyists went into overdrive. They donated to campaigns, funded community outreach, and hired crisis PR firms to reshape the story. In one case, a leaked email from a CoreCivic executive read, We need to remind voters that these are bad people, and we're protecting them. Fear became the product, and the public bought it. The backroom deals. In Texas, legislators once approved a $400 million private prison expansion without a single public hearing. In Florida, a senator's campaign was almost entirely funded by prison contractors. He later pushed a bill allowing private firms to manage parole decisions. In politics, control is currency, and the prison industry spends it well. The media influence. The narrative of fear doesn't spread on its own. It's cultivated in headlines, speeches, and ads. Private prison firms have donated to foundations that support crime alert news outlets and pro-incarceration think tanks. The result? A constant echo chamber. Crime is rising. Leniency is dangerous. Prisons are necessary. It's not just the bars that hold people captive. It's the story, the price of silence. When reporters try to investigate, they face corporate roadblocks. Private prisons are exempt from Freedom of Information Act, FOIA requests. They can deny access to data, footage, and even death records. Journalists said, they hide behind the word private, but they're paid with public money. Accountability fades behind a trademark. The human collateral. For every dollar that changes hands in Washington, a family pays in tears. When politicians protect corporate prisons, they protect a system where lives are metrics, and freedom is optional. The handshakes that happen in D.C. echo all the way back to the cell block. The illusion of reform. Even when reform makes headlines, private prisons adapt. After public backlash, CoreCivic rebranded, dropping the word correct, ions, and calling itself a real estate trust. GEO Group launched re-entry services, marketing halfway houses and ankle monitors as rehabilitation innovation. Different name, same game. Control, now packaged as compassion. Analysts said, they don't fear reform, they monetize it. The untouchables. Even after federal investigations, even after lawsuits and deaths, no major executive has gone to prison. In 2020, the Department of Justice ended new private contracts for federal prisons, but state deals continued untouched. For every law meant to stop them, a loophole waits in the next paragraph. Because in America, you can privatize punishment, but never the power that protects it. Resistance, whistleblowers, activists, and the fight to end prison for profit. Every system built on silence eventually meets someone who refuses to stay quiet. This is their story. The ones who fought back. The whistleblower's burden. Whistleblower said, "When I joined, I thought I was helping people. Then I realized I was helping a company hide pain." Meet Anna, a former nurse at a privately run facility in Louisiana. For years, she watched inmates go untreated, their complaints buried under paperwork labeled resolved. Anna said, "We'd get instructions from management, not doctors, about what medication to ration. It was all about saving costs." When Anna leaked internal reports to journalists, the company fired her and threatened legal action under confidentiality breach. She lost her job, her pension, and nearly her home. But she kept her voice. Across the U.S., whistleblowers like Anna are exposing the human cost of corporate corrections, often at great personal risk. The investigative journalists. While companies guard their data behind trademarks, a new wave of investigative journalists is finding ways to break through. Outlets like The Marsh, All Project, The Intercept, and Reuters have uncovered falsified safety reports, secret settlement agreements, and financial kickbacks buried inside contracts. What you just saw is more than a story. It's a reality lived by thousands behind bars. If you believe in uncovering the truth, the kind hidden behind concrete walls and silence, then join us. Subscribe to Behind Bars TV and never miss a chapter in the world's most dangerous stories. Until next time, stay aware, stay informed, and remember, freedom and confinement are sometimes only a wall apart.